In order to understand the Puritans, we must understand the theology of the Puritans, or their religious belief system. Now, this is the only time we'll talk about theology in this class, but there are certain things that everyone should know before they leave college. First and foremost, there are three religions of the book. When you say the book, that means the Old Testament. The Old Testament is the book of Muslims, Jews, and Christians. What makes Christians different is they also have the New Testament. Now, up until 1517, in the Western world, there was only one branch of Christianity, and that was the Roman Catholic Church. But on October 31st, Halloween, 1517, a German monk and theologian named Martin Luther posted his 95 theses, or 95 protests against the Catholic Church on the church door, ushering in one of the most important events in all of human history, the Protestant Reformation. So, in terms of Christianity, so there are three religions of the book, the Old Testament. In terms of Christianity, there are three branches. There are Eastern Orthodox, and that is what you get in Eastern Europe, like in Greece, especially in Russia, and like Alaska, if you ever go up there. If you have, they have Eastern Orthodox because obviously Alaska used to be owned by the Russians. If you ever see a cross that, normal crosses, well, the crosses we're used to look like this. If you ever see a cross that looks like this, and it's at an angle, that is an Eastern Orthodox church. That is what they have in Eastern Europe, Russia. In the Western world, they had Roman Catholicism. And then, with Martin Luther, we get Protestantism. Protestantism, it gets its name because it is a protest of the Catholic Church. The United States, it was founded by Protestants, and Protestantism is still the majority Christian denomination, and especially in Texas. Protestantism includes a ton of denominations. So Lutherans, Anabaptist, Amish, Mennonites, Presbyterians, Baptist, Methodist, Quakers, Anglicans. Those are all forms of Protestantism. Make sure you memorize this graph. No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to memorize it. It's very complicated, but just know there are three branches of Christianity. Don't worry about the comps, Thomas Christians. Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholics, and then Protestants are protesting the Catholic Church specifically. For our purposes, the ones that we are going to be focusing on, you have the Roman Catholic Church, and then you have Protestantism. Protestantism includes a whole bunch of groups. The Protestant denomination in England will be called the Church of England, and I'll explain where this come from in just a minute. The Church of England in the United States will become the Anglican Church after the American Revolution. So Anglican churches are the Church of England in America. The group that we are most interested in are the Puritans. Puritans are specifically English Protestants that want to purify the Church of England. I'll explain all this in just a minute, but just understand, in terms of the family tree, you have Protestantism, which includes a whole bunch of people, groups, denominations. And in England, it'll be the Church of England, and the group that we are specifically looking at that will colonize Massachusetts are the Puritans. So, all Puritans are Protestants, but not all Protestants are Puritans. So that is the theological background. And in terms of the belief systems of Protestantism, you should know this just because it's important to know, even if you are not religious, but especially if you are some denomination of Protestantism, like Baptist or Methodist, you should know the origins of your theology. Martin Luther ushered in the Protestant Reformation, but the person who will come up with the theology, where we get most of the belief systems, is a guy named John Calvin. That is where we get the term Calvinism. John Calvin is a French theologian, and he created the theological belief system that will especially differentiate Protestants from Catholics, and that is really important in understanding the Puritans of Massachusetts Bay. Now, there's a lot, but the most important are, for our purposes, are these. First and foremost, Protestants believe in what's called predestination. God is omnipotent and omnipresent. He is everywhere and all-powerful. So he knows who is going to heaven and who is going to hell before the person is even born. We are predestined for heaven or hell. Predestination is a key feature of Protestantism. That is in contrast to Catholics who believe in free will, or you can do good deeds to earn your way into heaven. That is what Catholics believe. You live a good life, and free will means you can earn your way into heaven. That is one of the protests that Martin Luther had, was during this period, the Catholic Church was literally selling salvation. So you could earn your way to, they actually had sheets like, if you want to save the soul of your grandmother who died and wasn't baptized or something, then you can donate this much money to the church. That is one of the practices that Martin Luther was protesting. So John Calvin will say that that was wrong, because if God's omnipotent and omnipresent, we are predestined for heaven or hell. He should already know whether we are going to heaven or hell. If you are predestined for heaven, it means you have received the grace of God, or salvation by grace, also known as amazing grace, which is where the song comes from. If you are Catholic, Catholics believed free will, you could earn your way into heaven through salvation by works, or you can work or earn your way into heaven. That is a key difference between Protestants and Catholics. When someone receives the grace of God, or salvation by grace, Protestants believe that when someone receives that, they will experience something called the covenant of grace. Covenant of grace is an experience and a key part of Puritanism in which God shows you that you are saved, that you have received salvation by grace. So a lot of the times, especially people that are born again to this day, they'll have some story of an experience they had. A lot of the times it will be something along the lines of, I used to drink and do drugs and sleep around, and then I was taking a shower, and all of a sudden I heard the voice of God, I saw a light, and that is the experience of the covenant of grace. That is God saying, you have received the grace of God, you are saved. So if someone receives the covenant of grace, then they are what are called the elect. This is really important, because in Puritan churches, only the elect, or someone that's experienced the covenant of grace, can be a full member of the church. The elect are people who have been saved. They are predestined for heaven. The reason this is so important to know is because in Massachusetts Bay, only the elect are allowed to vote. So that is how they will create a society that is governed by their religion or their theology, is because the only people that can hold political office, the only people that can vote, are people that have received salvation by grace, or received the grace of God. They are called the elect. So both men and women can be of the elect, but only men can vote. Also, everyone in Massachusetts has to go to church, but not all people that go to church are of the elect. So A very obvious question that people ask frequently is, so what is stopping someone from, the town drunk from saying, hey, guess what? I was out drinking and I received covenant of grace, so I'm saved. I'm a church member. I'm elect just like you. Well, so put another way, how could Puritans be sure someone would receive the covenant of grace? They would say it is impossible to be certain. The only entity that is certain that someone has truly experienced covenant of grace is God. However, Puritans would say there is a way that we can be pretty sure, and it's called an examination of souls. So the town drunk comes and say, hey, I've been drunk my whole life. I'm terrible to my kids and my wife, I left them and I was abusive, but I've experienced covenant of grace. The Puritans would put him through what's called the examination of souls. The person is brought in, sat in a chair, and then the other members of the elect of that church would then scrutinize everything about that person's life, ask them all sorts of questions, scrutinize their covenant of grace and their experience, and then the members of the elect, would vote on whether that person truly did receive salvation by grace or the grace of God. Even the Puritans would say this is not absolutely perfect, but it is as good of a test as we can have. So that is the biggest difference between Catholics and Protestants: salvation by works versus salvation by grace, or free will versus predestination. In Puritanism and Protestantism, they have the elect, which are the members of the church that are allowed to have the right to vote. And the second major difference between Catholics and Protestantism is the form of church governance. Catholics have what's called an episcopal form of governance. An episcopal form is a hierarchical form. So in the Catholic Church, the entity that speaks to God is the person at the very top, that is the Pope. Underneath the Pope, you have, there are layers and layers and layers. So at the very bottom is the laity. That's the average person that attends church. Then you have priests, then you have bishops, then you have archbishops, then you have cardinals, archdioceses, and it is a hierarchical system. It looks like a pyramid, and at the very top is the only individual that actually speaks to God, the Pope. Protestants did not believe in episcopal form of governance because they believed that God has said everything God needs to say, and it's in the Bible. So no one actually has a direct conversation with God. They believed in what's called a congregationalist system of governance. In a congregationalist system, there is no hierarchy. Every congregation has its own relationship with God. They are allowed, they don't speak to God, they interpret the Bible the way they want to. Each church is its own authority on who can be church members and what the Bible says. So at best there is a minister, and then you have the laity. So in a congregationalist system, there is a closer one-to-one relationship with God, which is a very individualistic system, which is why it is a very American system. Congregationalism will be what forms the kind of governance Protestants have, and is the kind of governance that we'll have in Massachusetts Bay. That is also why if someone says, I'm part of a Bible church, that is what they mean. Their denomination, their congregation, reads and interprets the Bible for themselves. So that is the theology behind Protestantism.